Hello, everybody. I just want to give a quick word to those who are serious about their walk with Christ, who are serious about sustaining their growth in the Lord. And this is regarding people who may encourage you to disobey the Lord just that one time, right? So consider the next person who encourages you to disobey God, the next person who encourages you, who attempts to have you sin and break your fellowship with Jesus, the next person who attempts, the next person who encourages you to forfeit your inheritance, to forfeit your place in the kingdom, to forfeit your favor with God with these words. Hey, God will forgive you this one time. Okay? You ever heard anybody say that? Like, God will forgive you this one time. It'll be okay if you do it this one time. God will forgive you. That person who is trying to encourage you to disobey God with those words, with that idea that it's okay this one time, you can do it this one time, God will forgive you. That person is a liar. I'll state it again. When a person is trying to encourage you to sin, willfully sin, just that one time, telling you that God will forgive you, it'll be okay if you just do it this one time, God understands the person is a liar and does not know God. You need to know that. And you have to think about it. You have to think about it. If a person does not know God, the person does not know God. And if a person does not know God, how are they in position to tell you what God will or will not forgive, what God will or will not overlook, what God does or does not mind, how God will or will not respond? They're not friends with God. They're not family with God. They're not co-workers, co-laborers on this earth with God. They do not walk with God. They don't know him to know how he would respond. They're just talking. They're just talking, and they're speaking lies. The person does not know God. And if you think Sister Tiffany is making this up, First John chapter 2, verse 4 states for us. It describes that to us. It says that he that says, I know him, I know God. He that says, I know him, and keeps not his commandment is a liar, and the truth is not of him. He that says, I know him, and keeps not his commandment is a liar, and the truth is not in him. So just consider, you have a person who is talking to you as if they know God, but telling you to disobey God, to ignore his commandments. Those are the telltale signs of a liar who is posturing to know the heart of the Lord when they clearly have no significant relationship with him, and is trying to put you in that same position, to be someone who has no relationship with the Lord. And not only does that person not know God, but if they're trying to convince you that it's okay to just disobey God this one time, not only do they not know God, they are actually operating under the spirit of Antichrist. Okay, just consider that. Consider that person who's trying to get you to intentionally disobey God's instructions, and kind of presenting to you, suggesting that instructions has been given to you by God, and they're somehow trying to convince you that there's going to be some kind of benefit to it. Like, hey, it's what do this thing. This one time, it's okay. There's some, obviously trying to convince you that there's some kind of benefit to it, and that it'll all be worth it to disobey the voice of the Lord. Is that not the very same voice? Is that not the same voice that spoke to Eve in the garden, that beguiled Eve, telling her that surely you will not die if you eat from this tree that God told you not to eat from? That's what the serpent said to Eve. Surely you won't die. I know that the Lord gave you these instructions. That's essentially what the serpent was saying to Eve. I know that the Lord gave you these instructions. I know that he told you that there's consequences for disobeying the instructions, that you'll experience death, that death will come upon you if you obey these instructions. But come on. Surely you won't die. That's what the serpent said. And what is death? What is death? Death is separation from life. It's as simple as that. Death is separation from life. Death is separation from God. It's the severing of your relationship. It's your relationship with, your connection to, your access to the true and living God who created you, who sustains you, who provides for you. That's what death is. And to disobey, to disobey is a sure way to ensure the gradual, if not the complete, severing of your relationship with God. That's what disobedience does. It creates division between you and God. It creates that division. And every time you disobey, there's a stripping of the grace of God that he put on your life. There's a stripping of the grace of God that he's put on your life. And so when there's a stripping away of the grace of God on your life, that is a stripping away of God's covering. There's a stripping away of God's favor. There's a stripping away of God's presence around, in your heart. And it's going to result in suffering. There's no way around that. Disobedience is going to cause a division, and where there's division between you and God, there is going to be suffering that could have been prevented. Now, obedience, on the other hand, is going to strengthen your connection with God. It's going to bring you closer. It's going to communicate. Obedience communicates to God. It's going to draw his attention. It's going to get his attention. It's going to make him pay more attention to you in a favorable way, because it's communicating to him that you are becoming the kind of person that he can bless with more. Every time you obey, you are demonstrating to God that he's the kind of person who he can entrust with his holy things, that he can entrust with his treasures. That's what obedience does. It makes God look on you like, yes, this is somebody I can give great things to. Disobedience does the exact opposite. It communicates to God that you simply cannot be trusted. You can't be trusted. That's what disobedience. Whenever you disobey, you are making a declaration to the Lord that, God, you cannot trust me. Look how I do. Look at the things. When you say go left, I'm going to go right. You can't trust that I'm going to walk in agreement with you. You can't trust that I'm going to maintain the things that you are developing. When you disobey God, you're saying, I'm the kind of person who, as soon as I think you're not looking, I'm going to destroy what you've done, or at least I'm going to attempt to. And see, we don't want to communicate that to the Lord. Our goal is to be God's friend. Our goal is to be God's friend. And so, but disobedience, we want to be the friends of God. But disobedience damages a part of our soul that allows us to be loyal to God. Right? When the part of our soul that allows us to be a friend to God is damaged every time we make a decision to disobey. And we cannot calculate we cannot calculate the level of damage that is done. There is disobedience diminishes the grace of God on us. Disobedience damages our faith. It causes our heart to be hardened towards God. And every act of disobedience is working a hardness in our heart. And once that happens, it becomes that much more difficult to obey God in the future. It makes us less sensitive to the voice of God. Disobedience makes us less sensitive to the presence of God. And once we lose that sensitivity, that means it becomes harder to hear him. Some of us are wondering, man, I just want to hear the voice. If I could just hear the voice of God, if I could just be aware of his presence. Don't we experience those thoughts as we're seeking the Lord? Even unbelievers are desiring to hear the voice of the Lord, seeking to know his presence and be aware, to know for sure that he's here. We're all desiring to know without the shadow of a doubt that God is moving, that God is working, that God is speaking. What he's speaking, is he saying to do this? Is he saying to do that? But when we disobey, the hardness that occurs, because grace, the life of God is being, when we disobey, it's like taking a needle and poking a hole in the areas of our being, that where the parts of us that contains the greater measures of God is just seeping out. That grace is seeping out, it's drying out. Think of the Spirit of the Lord as the water that nourishes our soul. But through disobedience, that's causing a wall to build up that blocks that flow of God to us. And a hardness occurs. And once the hardness occurs, it's hard for us to sense God. It's hard for us to sense his voice. It's hard for us to sense his movement. If we can't sense his movement, then how can we follow him, right? If you can't sense the movement of God, then how can you follow God? If you don't know in which way he's going, if you can't detect what he's doing, how can you follow? And so we cannot assume that, so you're going to lose. You're going to lose with that one act of obedience. That one act of obedience that the person promised you God will forgive, that your friend or comrade, that companion that you were listening to, that person who convinced you that God will forgive you, that God would, that it wouldn't be so bad, that everything was going to be okay. The person who has no idea how God would respond, they could not calculate, and neither could you calculate the loss, the damage that would occur through your one act of disobedience. And it's important that we really grasp this truth, that there is no disobeying God and there's no consequences. A lot of times when we do choose to disobey, it's because we really don't believe that there are consequences. And we really don't believe that the blessings we get from obeying is far beyond what we can fathom. If we truly believe that, we would not position ourselves to lose that, and we would not allow anybody else to position us, or we would not allow anybody else to position us to lose that. We cannot assume that we are going to lose when we disobey. We are going to gain when we obey the instructions of God. That is a guarantee. And the only way you can get evidence of that is to walk in it, walk in the obedience. And you will see evidence that God, when you are consistently obedient to the Lord, He responds with more goodness being poured on you. Like, that's a reality. But you have to do it. You have to do it. You have to grow in loyalty to the Lord. Loyalty to the Lord. So loyalty to the Lord goes beyond going to church and being active in church and declaring that you believe God. Loyalty to church, to God, consists of examining every aspect of your life, every aspect of your heart, every emotion you're feeling. The Lord is telling us He has not given us a spirit of fear, yet we're feeling fear. And it's not the fear of the Lord. It's the fear of our outward circumstances. It's the fear of being rejected by man. It's the fear of being overtaken and overcome and beaten by the world around us. We have to, when we feel those things, we are required by the Lord to examine those things. And if we can say that, yes, I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid of this bad thing happening, even though you didn't tell me that that bad thing was going to happen to me. I just see it happening to people around me, you know, because we're not factoring in that the people around us, even in the church, and some of the people in the churches, because they may not be fully surrendered in certain areas of the Lord, in certain areas of their lives, that they have opened doors in some kind of way to the Lord, but nobody's explaining that to us. So we thinking just random things happen to anybody, whether they're in the Lord or not. It makes us fearful. But the Lord is telling us that He will cover us. The Lord is telling us that that He has not given us a spirit of fear. He's telling us that the joy of the Lord is our strength. He's telling us not to be lustful, but you're dealing with that. You're dealing with that. You weren't even trying to look at anybody in any lustful way, yet the women around you are dressed in crazy ways and provocative ways. The advertisements, the videos, the movies are all being presented in a way to stir up lust in you. So involuntarily, you're being exposed to stuff. You're required to present that to the Lord and confess that to the Lord. Like, Lord, I'm dealing with it. Lord, I saw that. I wasn't trying to. Lord, you're required to spend more time with Him so that He can wash you and cleanse you, just like you have to take showers every day, sometimes more than one time a day, to stay fresh, to stay clean. You have to do the same thing in the Spirit. Yet the people of God, or at least those who are claiming to be the people of God, are taking it for granted. They think that they can walk in poo in the Spirit. They think that they can sin that one time, just that one time, and there won't be a stench on them that makes God want to turn away from you. Yes, God, you can do things that one time that make God want to say, ew, no, do not know, unless you're coming for cleansing, unless you're coming for strategy as to how to stay away from that scenario and not do that again. Because I don't want to keep smelling this every time I interact with you. Unless you want to come to me, and allow me to guide you, to shape you, to mold you into the person who do not desire to play in poo, then unless you want to do that, then there's got to be some separation between you and me. Yeah, part of the problem for some believers is that they're being convinced that there are no consequences for sin. But the Lord tells us, don't be afraid of man. Don't be afraid of people who can, of your life being taken by man. Be afraid of the one who can take your life and your soul and cast your body and soul in hell. In other words, God has to be our top priority, because we as the believers of God have to realize that any benefit we get is dependent on what God says. If God didn't say that that would benefit me, then I have to know it is not going to benefit me. It will harm me and ultimately separate me from God. It will kill me. If God says that this right here will benefit me, we don't say, yeah, I know God says, but we have to be wise. But wisdom is, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Understanding that he is the one who determines. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. It doesn't matter how they present it to you. It doesn't matter how they make it sound, how good, how beneficial they make it sound, how much they will play down the consequences. You better believe what God says, and he makes it clear to you in his word. There's some basic things that he makes clear to you in his word. And if you cannot master submitting to the basic things that he is revealing to us in his word, there's going to be some major things that you're going to eventually have to confront in your life, that you're eventually going to have to deal with in your life. And when it's time to deal with you, you are not going to be prepared, because you will not have the grace of God. You will have lost it through your continual small acts of disobedience. When you could have had more grace, when you could have had more glory to operate with power, with authority, with dominion, when you could have had more power to act in more obedience to the Lord and gain more favor, more from God, more wisdom, more insight, everything that you need. You could have had more, but you did not position yourself, because you allowed the liar in your life to tell you can do it this one time, and it's not going to, it won't affect you. You allowed the spirit of Antichrist to minister to you. Like I said, that is the spirit of Antichrist. That's exactly what the enemy did to, that's exactly how the enemy beguiled Eve in the garden, and he's trying to do the same thing with you. See, when he's talking to people who are in the world, he doesn't have to work so hard to cause them to do and make decisions that's going to destroy their lives and the lives of people around them. He doesn't have to work that hard to cause them to lose the glory that is on their life, because you do know that when people are outside of the Lord, there is still glory on their lives. You can see it in their beautiful faces. You know, there's people who are not in the Lord. They have skills, they have intellect, they have beauty. That's glory of God. That's a measure of glory of God's glory that's on them. And the enemy can easily convince them to strip themselves of that glory by making decisions that's going to destroy them. That's why people who live in sin, they age a lot faster. Some people, they be 30 years old looking like they're 62, because the enemy stripped them of their glory. So it's easier for Satan to reach somebody who's not in the world, to reach somebody who's in the world. But for those of us who are in the body, for those of us who are in the body, he has to be much more subtle. For those of us who already are walking in agreement, in measures of agreement, are growing in measures of agreement with God, he has a desire to strip you away from that walk, and he has to be more subtle. You know, some areas of disobedience, some forms of perversion, some forms of sin, we're aware enough to say no to. So he has to get you in those subtle ways. What kind of harm? What harm can it do? You know, he has to come in his subtle ways with those who are in the body. So you have to This is how you prepare for that. This is how you allow your foot. This is how you make sure that your foot don't slip. You prepare by seeking the Lord more. If you're not, so if you're struggling in disobedience, or if you're really concerned with making sure you maintain your level of obedience and grow in your measures of obedience, it's going to require positioning yourself to grow, positioning yourself to be stronger, which consists of seeking God, like simple stuff that people take for granted. I've heard it said in the world by haters of God. Like, see, this is why we can't accomplish nothing. You spend so much time praying and you don't do you're not doing anything. And what they really mean is you need to do some stuff that God is not on, the stuff that God is not on, that God is not endorsing. You need to do some of that stuff in order like stop praying and let me tell you some real strategies to accomplish things. That's what the wicked says. Now, what the Lord is saying, you do need to do, but you need to seek my voice so you can know what to do. And you need to seek my presence so you can have power to do. Because if I'm not doing it through you, if I'm not endorsing it, it will fail. It will curse you. It will curse you. It will curse you. And one of the curses is thinking you're succeeding in areas while your soul is being torn apart. Your soul is diminishing. That's one of the curses that manifest in those who turn away from God. But if you don't want to be one of those people, you need to seek his presence more than you already do. You need to engage him in worship with more vigor. Stop being afraid to wave your hand in church. Do you realize that the more energy you put, the more passion you put in your worship, whether you're alone in your home, in your car with the saints, the more you put into your worship, that's the more glory that you're offering to the Lord. And the more glory, obviously, is glory that he's giving you, that he's invested in you, and he's expecting you to give it back in return. And when you give it back in return, he enjoys it, he loves it, he embraces it, and he returns it to you double, triple. In some cases, more than he gives back, more than what you're giving him. So worship is a key component. It's not the only component. You have to seek him so that you can become the kind of person who he wants to bless, so that he can work on your heart. You have to make conscious decisions to cut off the things or the people in your life, in your atmosphere, in your home, on your television screen, on your radio, on your phone. You have to make decisions to remove those things. You cannot stop doing it. Stop watching it. Stop engaging certain people if you have to. Whatever you have to do to get stronger in the Lord, you need to do it. Because you're not going to be of any real benefit, of any real value. Your life will be vain. You're going to become more focused on this natural world and less focused on the kingdom. It's going to require, being strong in the Lord is going to require being at a healthy church to help sustain you, help develop you, help anchor you, help disciple you. We're not designed to do it on our own. There may be a few people, a small minority of people who are called by the Lord, who are able to grow and develop in him without without having someone to guide them, to lead them in the spirit, without having a pastor. And usually those people are the ones who are called to be pastors. And they're still going to be expected to somehow to develop a group of congregants in which everyone is blessing and benefiting from one another. That's just the way the Lord designed it. So you're going to need a healthy church. That means a church in which you're seeing the pastor and the members develop in the character of God. They're doing increasingly doing the things that Jesus said, the things that Jesus did, the things that Jesus is saying, the things that Jesus is doing. All right, so don't let these liars steal from you. Don't let them when that person who is telling you that it's all right, go ahead and sin this one time. God will forgive you. It won't make a difference. God understands. That person is being operated. It is being led by Satan to draw you away, to subtly draw you away. Satan just needs an opening so that he can rush in and bombard your life. You cannot assume that anything that you lose, and you will lose when you disobey, you cannot assume that anything you lose, you will recover. It is not a guarantee that you will recover the things that you've lost, right? It's very possible that there's a song, I remember a song, what God has for me is for me, that is true. But if you're choosing to reject it through disobedience, he can and do give it away to somebody else. That's a reality. And then the things you needed, you won't have. That doesn't mean that things can't be recovered. That doesn't mean that if he gives it to, he's not going to take it from somebody else. If they're being faithful, you've lost that one. But that doesn't mean that he can't give you something else. You can still get things if you repent. You can still get things. But you can't. God is merciful. He's merciful. He's gracious. He's loving. We are saved by grace. That means he chose to turn your heart, turn your mind. He chose to bestow himself on you to the degree that you would seek him out. It's his grace that sustains us. But don't let that have you thinking that you can calculate. You cannot calculate the damage that can be done from disobedience, just as you cannot calculate the benefits that you would get from obeying. You just obey, knowing that God is good, that he is all powerful and fully capable of doing every good thing that he said he'll do and more. And that's exactly what he does when we obey, beyond what we could have thought. He does things that our minds could not have thought of. He surprises us with things that we could not fathom could be possible. And unless you are committed to obeying the Lord and seeking him for the grace to obey him, you will never experience that measure of greatness or goodness. You'll always be on the lower level of his goodness, living a life of minimal glory. Singing songs as though you're experiencing God in this great way when you're experiencing minimal glory because you live a life of compromise. We can no longer let that be us. We cannot be worldly Christians. It will separate us from the Lord and possibly separate others because we influence people we have influence. And the only way you are going to make real benefit, have real benefit in people's lives, is to learn to obey God in everything, not in something, every aspect, constantly evaluating the Lord. And as you obey God in the small things, he's going to reveal more to you and release more good things to you. He's going to make you masters of great things. He's going to give you more authority, more power. And the things you read about, the things that are the great testimony, they're going to be your testimonies, not sometime testimonies. It's going to be all the time testimonies. You're going to live a lifestyle of the miraculous. You're going to live a miraculous life. You're not just going to have miraculous moments in life. Your life is going to be miraculous far beyond what anybody outside of the Lord would ever experience, far beyond what some people who are currently in the Lord experience. Let's choose life with God forever.